Well, I remember when I was at the so-called July 7th trial at Kingston, and they prepared a printout for journalists. I was trying to get a copy, and there was this BBC journalist, and he was telling me, oh, look, this explosive, black pepper and peroxide. And I said, look, do me a favour, will you? He said, no, look, it's similar to the July the 21st lot, which was chapati flour and peroxide. And I mean, the point about the chapati flour thing is it didn't blow up at all. There really were a bunch of these alleged wannabe terrorists who really did let off chapati flour and peroxide in the rucksacks, and it just sort of dribbled onto the ground and maybe went bust, and that's all it would do. And how can people tell stories like this, and why doesn't anyone laugh in the court when this comes out? That's what sort of puzzled me. That they could.
Again, it's all very much controlled. You've got to understand that your defence lawyer's first duty is to the law society, it's not to his client. And obviously the trial you're talking about, it was just taken as a given that 7/7 had happened in the way the official narrative suggested. There was no evidence adduced to support that at all.
No.
And of course, if the defence lawyer had really been working in the interests of his clients, he would have gone right at the heart of that story and attacked it from the word go.
Yeah.
But again, his first duty is to the law society, and we're beginning to realise that this goes into further, wider issues about things like the common law and their laws and so on, that we've arrived at a situation in which essentially the central banks run everything. They have done, it seems, since about 9/11, and this is why we get these stories that are fed to the media and uncritically reproduced. And what they also use is the way that government works in their favour. Now, there may have been people who are working on the inside that at the time of 7/7 had genuine worries about what was going on, genuine suspicions, but they, of course, will have now been posted somewhere else. The people that are coming after them, of course, weren't there at the time, so they're getting the story second-hand, will accept it uncritically.
Yeah, well, I remember at the so-called July 7th trial at Kingston, it started off with about 150 people were vetted for the jury, and they had to answer a whole lot of questions. So a questionnaire to select you for the jury, right? So they get a selected jury, and then the judge informs them that, of course, the four are guilty of this heinous crime, and we've got 3 friends who are still alive for being tried. So even after informing them of guilt and vetting the jury, still after 3 months, the jury said, jury did not find them guilty, okay? So what do? Oh, we'll have another trial. Get another jury. So the next year, 2009, they have another 3-month trial of these 3 friends of the 4, and they're sort of desperate. Look, we've got to put someone in jail for this 7/7 trial, because the only previous guy they tried to arrest was this Egyptian chemist. I don't know if you remember, Al-Magdi. He owned the so-called bomb factory. He just got a PhD from Leeds University in chemistry, and he was in Cairo, and they arrested him triumphantly. We arrested him on 7/7. They confiscated his laptop. His laptop was found to be full of classical music, right? So they let him off without any charge. If they let him off without any charge, how come they can still claim that his flat was the bomb-making factory? Okay? Anyway, they did. They let him off, and then they tried to convict some of these friends of the 7/7, because these friends went on a nice sort of pleasure sometime previous year with some of these 4 to London. They went to see the fish aquarium and stuff, and the London Eye, that sort of thing these young men liked. So a second big mega trial, 3 months, and that's far too long for anyone to sit through and follow what's going on, okay? Again, the jury fails to find them guilty, which is equivalent to finding them innocent, I think. And does that mean they can go home? Oh no. 2 of them are then found guilty for intending to go to terror training camp in Pakistan, which wasn't the original charge at all. And we're suddenly wondering, hey, how come that rabbit suddenly get pulled out of the hat? Well, what's important is that after all that grilling, you cannot get to talk to those young men. Because after all this preposterous nonsense of these anti-terror trials, the person we really want to talk to are the young Muslims whose lives are being ruined and getting accused of this. We want to hear their view. And I find my research in my book, Terror on the Tube, that's one that you could never do. I mean, I personally got vilified, political terrorist, for attempting to do this, but you can't ever get into Belmarsh prison.
Well, that's what they want to do. They want to keep all the witnesses away from everything else. And you say it's only through independent investigation that we establish what we have established. After all, it was you, who came here and established that the 740 train didn't run that day. It wasn't the mainstream media who did that. It wasn't the police.
No.
And that shows you again just how irresponsible government has become, and it is a requirement of any government that they do have investigations into these things. This is all part of the rule of law, and any investigation must be thorough and timely, basically.
Yeah.
And that is what they have failed to do. It failed out with 9/11. 9/11 inquiry took place 419 days after 9/11. Same as when I reported MI6 for funding Al-Qaeda.
Right.
The actual investigation took place something like 4 years after I'd first made that comment, basically. So that gives them 4 years to cover their tracks, basically.
Yeah.
And anybody who says, oh, they wouldn't do that, why wouldn't they do that? Of course they would. Any criminal who's faced with a potential criminal charge is serious of that, well, of course try and cover their tracks. It's quite obvious.
Yeah, well, I also got some really good letters from the father of the young 18-year-old Hasib Hussain, right? And one of them was how he's taking driving lessons. Father's doing driving lessons. He's really looking forward to getting his driving licence because he was engaged to his new bride from Pakistan, and he was really keen about just getting his grades from college. So he's totally looking forward to his life, right? And then you hear about 2 days after July the 7th, I think it's Monday evening, the police make their big breakthrough. They found Hasib Hussain's driving licence at Tavistock Square. And hang on, he hasn't got a driving licence. And how come whatever he's got is supposed to survive this incendiary blast? And then it turns out there might be a different Hasib Hussain they've somehow got it from, because they claimed he was at...
Can I just say with all this stuff as well, again, coming with a counter-terrorist background, is that in Lockerbie they were able to establish where certain bits of paper were on the plane by the kind of damage done by the bomb blast. When you forensicate it, of course, there'll be certain types of scorching, certain chemicals you would find on those pieces of paper.
Right.
So in this case, and it works very much like the passport found outside the Twin Towers as well. If some forensic work had been done on that, you can establish one way or the other whether it was actually in a blast or not. Yeah. And of course, I think it's very highly unlikely that it would be in a blast and finish up so much intact, basically.
Yeah.
And the same with all these things, because they claim to have identified 3 of the suicide bombers by documentation left at the scenes, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Even though Mohammed Sadiq Khan is actually supposed to be at 3 of the scenes, let's just try and forget that, shall we? You know, because it doesn't work with their thing. We seem to have moved, as I say, to a whole thing where governments tell stories and media just swallow it uncritically. But then again, that's not surprising. All the media on the planet is owned by 5 companies, and it's very easy for them to control the media, basically. And we've found that anybody who tries to, in fact, question what is going on the planet is very quickly marginalised.
Well, it was really funny the way key bits of photographic evidence come over from America, okay? We're here at Luton. Fiendish-looking bombs with shrapnel in them, alleged to have been found in one of the cars. That comes over from American news. And the most recent picture of one of the coaches, alleged to have been blown up, after it had been carefully, for example, all the walls and windows removed, that comes over from America. And it's been seen in America sometime before any of us see it here. So there is an American CIA-type connection here that's quite manifest.
Yeah, well, I think that could be quite good, though, as you say, because some of the stuff that's coming out is in our favour, and this gives me hope, is there's people on the inside of all these organisations, MI5, MI6, CIA, FBI, British government, American government, who are actually quietly trying to work towards the truth. But the problem they have, of course, they can't be too prominent, because very quickly the New World Order will see them as troublemakers and marginalise them.
So summarising, David, do we live in a country in which the government conspires to kill its own citizens?
I wouldn't say it's a government conspiracy as such. What I would say is that the country, it's very obvious, and the evidence that points to this is to do with things like debt and so on, is that every government in the world is answerable to a central bank. And these are part of the kind of what we would call the Zionist elite. The bank is the most obvious manifestation of the power structure, but they also maintain power through control of the energy supply, through creating war, through the pharmaceuticals industry, and that all then taps into things like the secret societies as well. So the actual puppet masters of the governments are not the governments themselves, they're people behind the scenes, and those people are very much capable of wiping out 3,000 people in New York, wiping out 50-odd people in London. That is all part of their plan. In fact, it's nothing when we think about it compared to the millions who've died unnecessarily in places like Iraq and Afghanistan.
No.
So these people are prepared to give up any lives, any number of lives for their own dark ends, essentially. So it's not the government. I'm not saying Tony Blair plotted 7/7. I'm not saying George Bush ordered 9/11. What I'm saying is there are people behind that have always controlled governments, in fact for 6,000 years have controlled governments, and they do not give a stuff about humanity. They have no compassion. They're psychopaths. They're brought up in a public school system and so on. So the answer to the question is yes, those people would have no problem with murdering people in cold blood.